I struck the match and a gloved hand closed on my wrist, yanking me hard enough that flame hissed against my palm. Fear sat cold and steady under my ribs. I could taste smoke and the iron tang of adrenaline. Men moved at the edge of the terrace. A car idled with its lights like an accusation. I had come outside to finish one thing: burn the letters that would not let me sleep. The funeral was hours behind us. The hush in the house had felt like a room full of held breaths, and the letters were the loudest thing I owned. I dropped my chin to hide my face and watched the paper blacken. My thumb brushed the twine knot. The match flared and threatened to take the whole bundle. Fear pushed me to act. I had to destroy what named him, what named everything I could not unlearn. My hands smelled like old glue and bergamot. When the glove tightened on my wrist, I tried to pull away, but the grip only became firmer. "Alina." A voice said, low and measured, "What are you doing?" The voice belonged to the man who had stepped out of the car, Luca Romano. He my name like a fact. He was close enough that I could see the thin scar at the right corner of his lip, the small crescent mark above his eyebrow, but his face held no easy expression. I said nothing. I kept the match near the letters. Behind me, someone spoke faster, higher. Sofia's voice cut across the terrace. "Alina, stop. Come back inside." Sofia Alvarez arrived in a breathless rush 2 steps after. She reached for my other arm. Her fingers bumped my elbow and steadied me. Her presence had a sound, quick stepping, a low hum of impatience, like the brass plate of her camera swinging against her hip. I let her anchor my elbow. Her eyes were hard and direct, and she said my name twice, as if to make sure I was actually there. The glove did not loosen. Luca moved with a control that made my mouth dry. "You burned something tonight that belongs to other people." His words were not loud. They did not need to be. The car's engine pulsed like a distant heartbeat. His hand dragged my wrist toward the waiting door and then released. "Get in." He pointed at the car with a trimmed finger. 2 other men stood half, hidden in the dark, coats like black shutters. Fear shifted into a sharper motion, a refusal. I stepped backward, keeping my thumb over the match. "No," I said, "these are mine." The letters were wrapped in twine and had been in my bag since morning. They smelled like stationery and parent, tea, and the funeral sold incense. I wanted them to burn, to stop naming the man who had died and the promises that had stayed behind. Luca watched the match as if it were a small animal. "They name someone who matters to me," he said. "You cannot destroy them without answering why." The word mattered changed the air. It made the letters heavier where they lay. Sofia stepped forward. "You can just take her," she told him. "Elena was at her father's funeral. She has a right to grieve." Her hands were empty, but her voice rolled forward with the steadiness of someone who had carried other people's burdens. She used my name like a shield. "Elena, come with me." I tightened my fingers on the twine. The match burned low. A small wind from the estate garden picked at the flame. I felt another shift inside. Doubt, a small, stubborn doubt about whether destroying the letters would help. The funeral had rearranged facts. The coffin had closed on the day, and yet questions had leaked out afterward. The letters were a danger and a relief at once. I wanted them gone because each line had pushed me toward decisions I had not consented to. Luca's gloved hand rested near the car door, as if the glove itself were a subject in the conversation. "If those names are evidence," he said, "they could put people at risk." His eyes flicked to the brazier, where a single ember still ate at the smallest scrap. "I won't let you burn them until I know what they say." Sofia's reply came quick. "Luca, you don't have the right." She stopped when he tilted his head, and something in his look made her mouth tighten. "You don't know what she needs," she added. Her sentence landed like a request. I made a choice in that fraction of time. I kept the match between my fingers and I moved toward the iron brazier at the terrace steps, where the stone bowl sat waiting like a small, honest pit. I wanted the letters gone in my hand. My need to destroy them did not feel like anger. It felt like a step I could take alone to close a chapter. When I reached the brazier, 2 men moved to block me. I put one foot onto the lowest step. "Elena, you can tee Luca." His voice was even, but the word "can tee" was a hinge. He reached for the bundle in a motion that tried to be gentle and then turned sharp when I resisted. Our hands collided above the flame. The match fell between us and went out. For a second we both held the bundle in each other's fingers. A scrap slipped free from the twine and fluttered, catching briefly on Lucas' thumb. I saw his hand close, the way his knuckles whitened. The scrap bore an inked name. I saw the first letter, an M, and then the rest bent away as ash. Lucas' face shifted faster than the night. His jaw set and something unreadable passed over his features. "Give it to me, Elena," he said. Now his voice had an edge. The other men stepped closer. Sophia moved so fast she nearly knocked one aside. "Luca, you can grab her like that," she snapped. Her voice shook. "Let go of her hand." "Sophia." Luca, cold, "Stand back." He still held the scrap between thumb and forefinger. He did not let go. My wrists were sore from the grip. I drew breath and did what I had come to do. I pulled the rest of the letters free and tossed them into the brazier with my shoulder, not looking away. Paper climbed to black and orange that swallowed the words. Heat licked at my face and the smoke stung. Ash rose in a small grey cloud and then fell back slow and exact. An external sound cut across the terrace. A car horn 2 drives away and then silence. A neighbor's dog barked. These ordinary noises made the scene sharper. I heard Sophia make a quiet, stunned sound beside me. Luca watched the pages burn. He lifted his hand with the single scrap still between his fingers and read the name in the dying light. He did not move his lips. He folded the scrap into his palm and crushed it with a thumb. The action was small and private, but it changed the air. This was important, it like a fact and like an accusation. Sophia reached for me and I let her hold my arm. Her fingers were warm. I felt relief that was not pure. My chest loosened and then tightened with guilt. I had burned their words and names, but the scrap Luca had saved hung in the space between us like the last bit of witness. He stepped back. "You should not have been alone tonight, Luca." He spoke to me and not to Sophia. "Come with me. I will keep you safe until I am certain nothing else is lost." His tone wrapped the sentence in authority. He put the offer as if it were a plan, not a question. I shoved at his hand, a quick, reflexive motion. "You grabbed me," I said. "You pushed me into the car." "You did not ask." Anger rose with a flavor of something else, sharp indignation and a trembling coiled beneath it. "Luca, I want to finish what I started. I want to bury these names and stop letting them name my nights." Luca's eyes were steady. "Names can bind other people," he said. "There are names in your letters that belong to the dead and to the living. I cannot let you burn them until I understand who is named," his voice even precise. Sophia's reply was immediate. "What does that mean?" She demanded. "Luca, who are you protecting? Tell us." He did not answer at once. He turned his head toward the estate house, where the funeral candles still dented the drawing room's windows with soft light. The funeral earlier concealed a death connected to some of these names. "I have ties that make those names dangerous if they are destroyed." That sentence shifted everything into a new shape. I felt an emotion move through me that felt like refusal turning slow. Suspicion. Suspicion moved my body. I straightened and looked into his face for more. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Whose death?" Luca did not give me a name. He reached instead into his coat and produced a small object wrapped in oil, stained cloth. A rosary, beads worn smooth. He did not offer it to me. He set the rosary on the stone edge of the brazier and then walked back to the car. Sophia's voice grew low and quick. "Luca, we are not children. You can take her. She is Elena. She is allowed to decide what to keep and what to destroy." He met Sophia's eyes. "Sophia, I know your face. I know your name. I respect you. But this is not only about Elena." He it plainly. "Someone at that funeral is linked to these letters and to a man who died tonight. If I do not know what those letters say, I cannot protect everyone who could be harmed." An argument started then, short and sharp. "Sophia," you pulled her arm. "You didn't ask, Luca. I saved lives before. You must trust me, Sophia. We don't have to trust you. You can show us what you know." The exchange lasted like a small flare, 3 quick rounds, sharp as stone hitting glass. At the end of it I felt the old pushing knot of grief again, but now braided with confusion and a rising need to act. The brazier was mostly ash. My letters were done. The scrap in Luca's hand had burned to a darker smudge, but the first letter had been clear enough. He kept the smallest piece between 2 fingers and did not look up. "Sophia, Elena, do you want to go with him?" Her voice had the steadiness she always used when she placed a thermos in my hands and told me to breathe. I hesitated. The funeral earlier had been full of faces that folded away after the ceremony, the way people leave a graveyard and then forget the road home. My father had been gone for months, and the house had felt like an occupied shell since the notices arrived. I wanted closure that meant something concrete. "I took a breath. If I go with him," I said, "I want one condition. I want you, Sophia, with me whenever I'm allowed to leave the car." I said my name aloud when I made my choice, like an agreement. Sophia nodded without speaking. Luca watched me. He put the small scrap into his pocket, as if the act counted for restraint. He opened the car door. "Get in," he said. Now, his instruction left no room for negotiation. I stepped forward. My hands still smelled of ash. I slid into the leather seat, and the world immediately shifted. Warm interior, closed leather, the echo of shoes on stone. The car closed around us like a room. 2 men sat in front. Luca came around and sat beside the driver. He glanced at me exactly once. "Elena," he said softly, "you did the right thing to finish burning, but you destroyed evidence." I kept a scrap. That scrap named someone who was at the funeral and whose death matters to me. His speech was flat. He did not pause for effect. "Who?" I asked. My voice sounded small in the car. He hesitated, and the hesitation was a hinge. He did not say a name. Instead, he put a hand out and, without touching me, rested it at the small of my back for a fraction of a second. The gesture was instructive and strangely protective. I felt a thrum of something like safety, and then I rejected it. "Luca," I said, "if you have questions, ask them. Don't keep me in the dark." He did not answer. The car pulled away from the gravel and onto the drive. The estate's lamp light skimmed across the roof and the wet hedges. Sophia's hand stayed on my forearm until we turned onto the lane. Then she withdrew and let the car shadow take us. Half an hour later, the driver stopped at a house I had not seen before, a building of stone and blank windows beyond the city. Luca opened the door and slid out. He waited until I had taken a breath and stepped into the cold. "You will stay here for the night," he said, pointing at the entry hall. "You will not leave alone. If anyone comes for you, you call me or Sophia." I folded the last of my gloves into my coat pocket and looked at him. "You didn't tell me why this matters to you. Someone at the funeral is connected. Tell me." He met my eyes, and for the first time that night he gave me a small admission. "My cousin died today," he said. "He was part of the same world where names on paper can start wars. If those letters named him or named people who knew him, burning them changes who can be found guilty and who can be blamed." He did not apologize. He only stated the fact and stepped aside so I could pass into the house. Inside, the room smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Sophia sat at a small table and handed me a paper cup. Her face was drained. "You're safe for now," she said. "I'll sleep on the couch." She set a battered thermos between us like a pledge. I felt tired in a different way, not only the house-sworn weight, but an exhaustion that belonged to decisions finally made. We spoke little. Luca waited in the entryway, watching but not intruding. He kept his hands to himself. When he finally spoke, it was to give me a small, clear instruction about what he needed to know the next day. Who had written each letter, when they'd been sent, and whether any name repeated. He me to write the names while Sophia stayed with me, and to hand the notes to him with no copies. I picked up a pen, because action steadied me. I wrote the names as best as I remembered them, line after line on a small sheet. The handwriting of one who measures syllables carefully. Each name pressed the paper in a different way. Part of me wanted to keep the list private. Part of me knew the list might protect other people if Luca was right. When I finished, Luca took the paper and folded it once. He put it in his pocket with the same small care he'd shown the scrap earlier. "Tomorrow we will talk properly. For now, sleep. You are safe here." Sophia set an old blanket across the couch and made sure my feet were covered. I lay down with the sensation of ash under my nails and the taste of burnt paper on my tongue. I thought of the scrap with the initial M, and of Lucas' cousin, and of the strings that names can pull. I thought of how burning had felt like finishing a sentence. I closed my eyes and tried to let my breath slow. Outside, the terrace brazier was cold. A single dark smear of soot had stained its lip. In the hours before dawn, I woke to the sound of the car starting and stopping in the lane. I heard Luca move across the room, then silence. Sophia slept on, breathing regular and close. I rose and walked to the window. The terrace below showed the faint print of footprints and a dark ring of ash. I kept one thing from the fire: a charred corner that had curled into a black edge. I had fished it from the brazier while no one watched, because I could not bear to let all of it vanish. The corner had a single, scorched letter that meant nothing alone, but meant everything when joined to the rest. I slid the scrap into my palm and let it cool. Luca stepped into the doorway behind me. He did not touch me. You kept something. His voice did not ask permission. It noted a fact. Yes, I said. I turned and saw him fully. His suit, the heavy gold watch, a crease at his temple. He met my eyes. And for the first time the lines around his mouth eased, as if the night's decisions had shifted something in him. You made a hard choice tonight, he said. You destroyed a risk to yourself and possibly to others. But you also removed proof I might need. We will need to walk carefully. He stepped back into shadow and left me holding the charred corner. I pressed the scrap to my heart and felt the small hard beat of it under my palm. My fear had led me to act. Doubt had followed. Now a quiet steadiness took root. I had done what I could in the moment. The next move belonged to others as much as to me. When Luca closed the door behind him, the house felt larger and stranger. I folded my hands over the scrap and then tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat. Dawn was not far, and with it would come questions that would not be answered by ash alone. I sat on the couch and let the room hold me. Somewhere down the drive a car idled, and then it left. The night had ended with a name smudged in soot and a promise implied by a man who would not explain himself fully. I did not sleep again before morning. My last thought before light eased the sky was concrete. Tomorrow, I would tell Luca every detail I could remember and force him to tell me what he knew. The terrace brazier would still be there. The ash would still be faint on the stone. A scrap of charred paper pressed into my pocket would be the only proof I had kept, and I would wake with the heavy, exact resolve to make each word matter. That was enough for now. The estate swallowed silence, and I sat waiting with a single, small relic in my palm. A hand shoved me into the back seat, and the car door slammed before I could drop the last ember. Fear sat under my ribs like a stone, hard and low. I could feel it in my throat and in the raw heat of the match burn across my palm. That fear made me keep my jaw tight as the man in the front snapped orders in Italian, and the engine rolled us away from the terrace. I had come out to finish the letters. I had not meant for anyone to see the flame. I pressed my fingers together where the match had stung and tried to pull the bundle closer without looking at it. The letters had been wrapped in twine the way Sophia always wrapped the thermos, careful small knots. The twine had felt like a finger around my wrist the moment the hand closed on me earlier. Fear pushed me into silence, and then suspicion settled on top of it. Why had anyone been watching the terrace tonight? The car smelled of leather and the faint copper of old paper. A man I knew only as a driver kept his eyes on the road. Another sat between driver and passenger with a jacket collar up. Luca sat in the front passenger seat. I could see the edge of his jaw in profile through the rearview mirror. A square of jaw, a small crescent scar catching the amber of the dashboard. I had seen him on the terrace too, his silhouette like a dark weight by the car. He did not move now. He watched Alina, he said without turning. Why were you burning them? His voice was low, controlled. It was a demand, not a question. I swallowed air and let the immediate panic guide me into facts. They were mine, I said. I burned them after the funeral. I wanted them gone. My voice was steady. I focused on the word funeral. I wanted the sentence to be plain and solid, to show I had a reason that was not treachery. Lucas' eyes cut toward the mirror, whose name was on them. He asked. His hand went to the heavy signet at his knuckle, and I saw the way his fingers curled, measured. Fear shifted under my sternum into something I sharpened into defiance. I refused to hand over a private grief. I refused to speak without a reason that could protect what I still owned of my past. They were from Marco, I said, from Marco Silvestri. He wrote to me during the year before he died. The name landed in the car like a stone into a calm pool. Lucas' jaw tightened. The driver slowed and pulled into the circular drive by the estate main entrance. Men in coats stood like gates near the door. My pulse picked up, my body tightened at simple, useful things. The brass of the doorknob, the scrape of a boot on stone. The stakes were concrete now. The problem was not private grief anymore. Someone at this house had a reason to own those pages. They guided me inside with more hands than one would expect for the sister of a man who had just been buried. The foyer smelled like boiled coffee and polish. Lamps burned in warm pools. Men blocked the stairways. Luca walked beside me. His stride matched the measured pace I had seen before, authoritative. He kept a hand near the small of my back as if to steer rather than to touch. The proximity made the heat under my skin move from fear into a sharper suspicion. Was I an intruder or an asset now? Sophia appeared in the sitting room like a steady exhale. She came forward with her old brass camera hanging from her neck, one hand full of worry and the other reaching for the twine I still pressed. "Elena, you idiot," she said. Her voice was quick and bright, but it held iron. She sat me down and took the charred bundle from my hands. "Why would you do this alone?" she asked. She did not sound like someone who only wanted comfort. She sounded like someone who wanted facts. Sophia's fingers parted the burned papers. She muttered until something half-legible lay on the low table. A smudge of ink, a loop of a name and a date. She squinted. "Wait." Her eyes snapped to Luca. "Elena, that's a name and a date. It's from June 21st last year." Sophia's voice hit the room like a bell. Luca's shoulders shifted. He stepped forward and the room shrank around us. "Give me that," he said. He took the fragments with a slow, precise motion. He spread them under a lamp and leaned close. The light cut across the letters. He read one of the torn lines and his face went still in a way I had not seen before. No softness, no immediate protectiveness, only calculation. Fear became anger then, hot and raw. I could hear the brittle edge in my own voice. "You don't get to decide who my letters belong to," I said. "They are not your property." I stood. The movement quick enough to make someone step back. Luca did not move to stop me. I burned them to stop myself from waking to his handwriting every morning. I didn't know this night would end with men at my door. I kept my sentences tight. Each word had to carry fact and force. Luca's hand closed on the back of a chair. "Marco Silvestri is tied to something that happened on June 21st, he said. "A fight. A man dead in the square. Names were exchanged. These papers could change who is blamed." His voice did not lift. It did not have to. The men in the doorway shifted their weight. Sophia looked from the ash to me. Elena, her hand found mine and squeezed. A physical fact that cut through the room. "Tell him exactly what you remember." No hiding. She had always been the practical one. She had always sorted chaos into lists and plans. I told them. I told Luca and Sophia the measured timeline of meetings, of letters slipped into my mailbox, of an engagement that had never been announced. I spoke in plain sentences about how Marco had come to the funeral 3 months before, how he had smiled at the photograph on the table, and then left without speaking, how his handwriting had been the only thing I kept. Luca listened without interruption. He short questions that cut to specifics. When had I seen Marco last? Where had he written from? Who had seen the letters? Each question was a nail. Each answer I gave tightened the construction around me. My fear shifted again, this time into doubt. Doubt about whom I had trusted. Doubt about whether silence could still protect me. Doubt pushed me to tell one more truth. "He wrote from an address in the old quarter," I said, "not here. He wrote that it was safer to hide the truth. He was sorry for what happened on June 21st. My hands trembled as I said the last line. The trimmer showed at the edges. Luca's hand closed around the charred fragments between his fingers. He did not look at me when he said, "Bring me the rest. Tell me where you kept them." His voice was a demand again, surgical. I named the small cedar box under my mother's bed where I had hidden the letters. That admission was a pivot. The room shifted. Two men moved like they had been given permission to act. One left the room with the fragments and the other walked to the hall phone. The external event happened. Someone at the edge of the study announced the house would be searched. The sound of shoes on the marble felt like a verdict. They escorted me to the study under a single lamp. The study smelled like old bindings and lemon polish. The lamp's circle left the rest of the room in a kind of practical dimness that made faces look blunt and precise. Luca sat opposite me. A bodyguard stood angled near the door. The charred scraps were spread on the table between us. He made to recount every letter. He wanted the dates, the phrases, the postmarks. He wanted to know if anything in the letters linked Marco to men who had been with Luca 5 years ago. He pressed until I hesitated. The room waited. My hesitance was an event in itself. It held space for choices: Alina, Luca softly. The softness was not pity. It was a controlled pressure that invited compliance. If you lie, you make this worse for yourself. If you tell the truth, maybe you stay here and you are not handed over. His words were practical. They read as an offer and a threat at once. Sofia came to the doorway and leaned against the frame. "Luca," she said, "she isn't hiding for spite. Let her explain. Let me help untangle this mess." Her tone was quick. She did not beg. She offered motion. She was always the one to step in when others hesitated. When the interrogation tightened, my fear turned into a hollow that made breathing mechanical. I spoke the time and the address where Marco had said the last note. I read aloud the fragment I could still make out. A line about being sorry and about a date. Each word I said removed a layer of control I had clung to. Luca's face did not change, his hands did. He slid the pieces into an envelope and tucked it into his inside pocket. "You kept a wedding band in a drawer and did not wear it." Luca, surprising me, why? His question came quick, a pivot. I had forgotten the ring in a slate box, under a pile of socks in my mother's dresser. The ring had been a quiet fact about my past. I admitted it. My confession made something else move. His gaze hardened. An officer at the hall reported a name heard on one of the charred pages. The name matched a note in Luca's ledger. The air in the study grew tighter. My doubt bled into anger again. "You have men who can pull documents and ledger entries in an hour," I snapped. "You could have asked me before you started hauling me around this house." My voice carried more hurt than I meant. Luca lifted his hand to still me, then let it fall. The interrogation reached a peak. Luca for details about June 21st I did not know. He about a man I had only seen in a photograph on the table at the funeral. He questioned whether Marco had been working with someone who had crossed Luca's men. My answers faltered. The pressure built like a tightening band. Then, during a pause, a phone on the desk buzzed. The bodyguard answered and covered the receiver with his hand. He whispered a name and then looked up at Luca. The whisper hit the room. Fast footsteps moved. The external event snapped like a branch. Someone at the perimeter had been delayed at the gate. A courier had arrived with a paper that mentioned the same June date and a different name. Luca read the courier paper. He folded it and placed it on top of the envelope with my letters. He tapped the table twice. "So there are two names," he said, "Marco Silvestri and Paolo Bertoni. Paolo is listed in a file connected to last year's incident." "Elena, did you ever meet Paolo?" The question was precise and cold. I shook my head. "No, I never met him." I swallowed. My hands were steadier than I felt. The absence of the name in my memory became a new hollow of worry. What had Marco hidden from me? Why had Paolo's name appeared now? Sofia leaned in and said, "Then we need to find Paolo. Let me help." "Elena, isn't he the kind of person who covers things up to hurt anyone?" She wanted closure. Her voice tried on an argument and then tossed it like a rope. Luca considered it. An unexpected shift happened. Luca set the envelope down and looked directly at me. "Elena Ricci," he said, calling my full name in a way that made my shoulders respond. "I am not handing you to anyone tonight. You will stay in the house. My men will watch the exits. Sophia will stay with you. You will answer questions when I ask them. No leaving the property alone. His words were a boundary and an order. Relief moved through me so quietly it felt like a room unlocking. The relief did not erase shame or the sting of being controlled, but it was a measured easing that kept me from rising into panic. I nodded. I will stay, I said. Saying it out loud made the choice real. Sophia stepped forward and put a hand on my arm. I will help find Paulo, she said. I'll go to the old quarter tomorrow at dawn. I'll talk to the baker, to the watchman. I'll look for any paper trail. Her promise was work, not sentiment. It planted a practical plan in the room. Luca folded his hands and studied the envelope in his lap. He did not smile. He did not soften. He issued orders in short sentences. A guard at the east gate, the driver to remain on call, a list of names to call in the morning. Each instruction tightened the net but also created a space where I could breathe. Before the study emptied, I handed him the empty twine I had wrapped around the letters. Take this, I said. Keep it if you need to know I gave it to you willingly. Keep it if it helps you decide I am not a liar. My voice did not tremble now. The action was small and concrete. I set the twine on the table between his fingers. His thumb pressed it once and then let it lie. Sophia gathered the remaining burned pieces into a small tin and put it in her bag. She zipped it closed and kept the brass camera strap taut over her shoulder. We start tomorrow, she said. We will be useful. Her voice had an edge I recognized from shared nights of carrying each other through small disasters. Luca rose and walked to the window that looked over the dark lawn. He did not stand close to me. He did not smile. He only said, "Do not leave the house tonight. If anything changes, you tell me. Do you understand, Elena?" The command left little space for ambiguity. I understood. I said, "I understand." Saying it again made it a fact that anchored me. The chapter of this night closed with men moving through rooms, with paper being bagged and catalogued, with Sophia insisting on a plan for morning, and with Luca setting a boundary that kept me inside his house. When they led me toward the guest room, a bodyguard paused at the hallway and looked briefly at Luca. Luca nodded once. The guard moved down the hall and stopped at the terrace door, where two men now stood with coats on, watching the night beyond the lamps. The house settled into a watchful order. The last concrete sound I heard was the door closing softly behind Sophia as she left to collect her things, and the study lamp clicking off in the emptiness of the room. The night held its breath. The house locked itself into a guarded waiting. That was where the chapter ended, and where I was left to sleep under the weight of decisions that were not entirely mine. The match flared between my fingers and a gloved hand slammed down on my wrist. Fear arrived as a hard, immediate pressure under my ribs and pushed my tongue dry. I tasted sulfur and the paper's thin smoke. I had come into the library to burn the letters, after the funeral, after the guests left, after everyone else had folded up grief into polite gestures. And I meant to finish it there, alone on the terrace. My name is Elena Ricci. I had stayed at the family estate to sort the house, to catalogue cupboards, to keep the funeral quiet and exact. The stack of letters had sat on the kitchen counter all week, knotted with twine, smelling of dust and lemon oil. I wanted them gone. Someone caught my wrist and the match went out against my palm. The glove was leather, thick and warm. The hand belonged to Luca Romano. I heard his shoes scrape on the rug before I looked up. His face was a flat plane of intent. "What are you doing, Elena?" Fear shifted into something sharper. I pulled my hand back and the letters slid, starling toward the iron bowl at my feet. "They have to go," I said. My voice was small. I kept seeing my mother's handwriting on the top envelope, slanted, certain the way she wrote dates in the margins. I had spent 2 days turning those pages. Each one mapped a moment I could not return to. A promise, a betrayal, instructions folded between declarations. They tied grief to facts I could not undo. I needed the burn to be an end. Luca picked up the bundle and held it between his hands like an accusation. "You done T-burn evidence in a house with other people around," he said. His words were calm. They were also an order. Sophia arrived at the doorway, breathless, coat thrown open, hair a dark halo. "Elena," she said, "what are you doing out here?" Sophia moved forward and hit Lucas' arm. "Give them back. Those belong to her." Her hand closed on the corner of an envelope still visible beneath his thumb. Luca looked at Sophia with steady grey eyes. "Step back, Sophia. This is between me and her." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His presence tightened the air. Sophia did not step back. She grabbed the visible envelope and held it at arm's length. "Elena will decide." Elena, her voice had the flat, exact tone she used when she drove a car on icy streets. Protective, immovable. The library smelled of coal and old paper. The hearth poker lay on its stand. A lamp burned low on the writing desk. I could see the terrace through the French doors, black as wet glass. My hands shook. I set the matchbox on the mantel with deliberate fingers. I wanted the match that had gone out back. Luca opened the top letter and read one line aloud in Italian. His accent tightened the consonants like a lock. He stopped on a jagged sentence and looked at me. "Is this her handwriting?" he asked. I pressed my hands together until my knuckles whitened. "Yes, it's hers," I said. "She wrote to me. She wrote about him. She wrote everything I needed to forget." I said the last phrase too quickly and my voice broke. Luca folded the letter back and did not look away. "Her references, this name. I know it." His hand tightened the paper. "I have reasons to keep these safe, Elena. Burning them here puts everyone at risk." Sophia put a hand on my shoulder, quick and sure. "He is not the one who decides what she does with her things, Luca. Elena is the one who knows what she needs." Her grip was warm. Her eyes asked me to choose. Fear bled into anger then, a hot flush that made my jaw ache. The letters had been mine to hold and to destroy. Grief had taught me to hold things tight. Anger taught me to let go on my terms. "They are mine," I said. "They have nothing to do with your business, Luca. They are paper and memory. They are mine to burn if I want to burn them." My words were clipped. I angled my chin up enough to make the defiance visible. Luca's mouth made a line. "This is not about business," he said. "This is about safety." He pushed open a drawer and drew out a small black iron bowl. He set it on the rug exactly centered. He moved with the care of a man who calculates distance for protection. Sophia stepped forward and offered a compromise. "Then take them. Keep them sealed. But Elena will know where they are. Elena will decide when they are destroyed." Her sentence was quick. She spoke with the cadence of someone used to bargaining for more time. Luca's head tilted. He glanced at the bowl, at the lamp, at me. "If I take them," he said, "I will lock them away. You will not see them again unless I let you. You want them burned. You do not want them held. Which do you choose?" I closed my eyes. I could feel my mother's handwriting pressing through the thin paper under my palm as if the words were still warm. Pieces of memory came back as concrete events. The morning my mother left for a meeting and kissed the top of my head. The night my father asked questions he could not ask aloud. The funeral, the small white cards in the pew pockets, the hush of linen skirts. I could not let the letters become a weapon against my family. I also could not imagine living with them tucked away in someone else's box. My voice came out in a single sentence. "I will burn them now." Sophia's fingers tightened at my elbow. Luca's thumb rested against the edge of the top envelope. Nothing. He simply lifted his hand, and for the first time that night, let his guard down enough for a small, private thing to register. His knuckles whitened where the wrist met the glove. He looked at me in a way that asked a question he did not speak. Another sound cut the room. A car door thudding outside, near the courtyard. The sound landed like an external punctuation mark. A man's boots moved on stone. Luca flinched and then turned his head. "Gianni," he said under his breath, "do not move. Close the doors." His voice carried a command that made the hair at the back of my neck lift. An external event. Someone arrived. My heart ratcheted up a notch. Saxony wool scraped the chair as Luca reached for the letters again. Sophia swallowed. "Elena, you promised me you would let me help you with this. Let me hold the match. Let me be the one who burns them for you." Her voice tried for softness and landed on determination. She pushed a single matchbook across toward me. I took it. My fingers brushed hers. The contact steadied me enough to locate the matchbox strike. Luca watched my hands. The leader in him receded into the man I had seen at the funeral, restraint, calculation, and a sudden, private tenderness. Luca read one line aloud again, slowly. If anything happens, do not leave the keys where anyone can find them. He looked up. Your mother gave instructions with the same hand that wrote comfort, Elena. She left directions for the estate. That is not only paper, that is access. Do you want someone else to take what she left? My stomach dropped. This was a reveal that changed my understanding of his intervention. I thought the letters had been private grief. Now I saw the letters contained practical directions that altered legal and physical control of the house. My fear shifted into careful calculation. If someone could use those words to open a door, someone could use them to claim property, to find hidden documents. Who else would want the keys? I asked. I forced my voice to remain flat. I did not want to sound smaller than I felt. Luca did not frame his answer as speculation. He named a name I had heard whispered around my father's office. The Basil brothers have been asking. They know your mother's handwriting was particular. They 3 times in the last month. Who keeps the ledgers? They sent a note. He set the letters down on his palm as if they were fragile glass. Sophia made a sound in the back of her throat. Luca, she said, and the word was equal parts plea and command. We cannot let them take anything. Elena needs to decide, but we also need to secure the estate. Her hands moved, practical. She opened the desk drawer and pulled out a small flashlight, checking the batteries with quick fingers. Another outside sound. A low engine idling beyond the gate. It grounded the threat. I swallowed and looked at the bowl. The iron looked like a small grave. My fingers trembled over the matchbook. I thought of my mother's hands folding a letter and tucking a corner with a fingernail. I thought of the funeral when a cousin mistook the wrong envelope for a will. I thought of what it would feel like to have my family's last formal words used as leverage. I said, if Luca keeps them, he promises to inventory and to lock them in a safe. Sophia will be present when they are catalogued. I will sign where necessary. After that, if I want them destroyed, they will be destroyed in my presence. My sentence was a list of conditions that made the choice into action and not surrender. Luca looked at me and then at Sophia. You will be present, he said to Sophia. You will witness. I will not open them unless we all agree. His voice softened only on the agreement to witness. He handed the bundle back, and for a moment his fingers brushed mine. The brush of his skin happened and meant something I had not expected. Sophia saw it too. Elena, she said close to my ear, do you want to do it now? Burn them now here. If you do, I will be by your side. Her voice was a steadying thing. I could hear her pulse in the smallness of her admission. I nodded. The anger was still there, braided now with a small, fierce hope that I could close this door on my terms. I struck another match. Luca knelt with the bowl on his knees and tipped the top page toward the flame so the edge caught immediately. The letters began to curl. The first sheet blackened with a sound like paper sighing. A noise came from the library doorway, a scuff of movement that meant someone on the terrace had shifted. My breath hitched, a shadow detached from the frame. One of Luca's lieutenants stood at attention, a square, shouldered figure I had not noticed before. He moved like a man rehearsed in blocking lines and protective reaction. Without asking, he crossed the room and planted himself between the French doors and the hearth. He did not speak. His eyes tracked the flame. Sophia held my hand as the pages took fire. I watched the letters fold into each other, and then into a small column of hot ash. The smell tightened my throat in a way that made me cough. I coughed then, and the cough sounded more like relief than pain. Suddenly the lieutenant made a motion, too fast, a step forward, a hand reaching for something unseen, and Luca's body went between me and the man like a physical answer. He shoved the officer back with one hand and pivoted to face the door. What is going on? He barked, and there was a blade of command that made the lieutenant freeze. The small movement became a spike of danger. My breath stopped. I realized in one clipped instant that the arrival outside had not been incidental. Luca's hand closed around mine. He pushed my fingers away from the bowl without letting go of my wrist. Drop it now, Alina. Move. His voice flattened into the tone he used when he expected obedience in the field. I did as he said. I let go of the match and stepped backward. The bowl took the last sheet and flared. The flame swallowed the final sentences. The last charred edge fell into a black pocket of ash. For a second no one moved. Then Luca turned and walked to the French doors. He opened them a fraction and looked out. Moonlight pooled on the terrace stones. Two figures stood by the car in the courtyard, faces obscured. One wore a dark coat and the other shifted weight as if searching pockets. Luca's voice was low. Who are you? A man's voice returned, muffled by the glass. We have a message for Romano, he said. Luca's shoulders tightened. He did not step outside. He shut the doors and crossed the room with a slow, deliberate step. He knelt again and blew out the remaining flame. The bowl smoked. He cupped a scrap of charred paper and slipped it into his palm. He did not answer my look. Instead he handed the bowl to his lieutenant and said, "Lock the doors. No one leaves. Not until I say so." My name then, quietly. "Alina, come with me." Now, Sofia grabbed my coat and pulled it on. Her hands were efficient. "Luca, tell me what you want me to do," she asked. "Tell me where to stand. Tell me when to speak." Her way of speaking was a map of control. She looked at me and said, "Elena, I am not leaving you. Not tonight." We moved as a unit through the house into the private hall behind the library. A narrow corridor with paintings of ancestors who had folded their hands over ledgers. Luca closed the door behind us and locked it. He set the bowl beside the fireplace, shoveled the ash with care into a small packet, and sealed it in an envelope. My fingers were empty. The matchbox sat on the mantel, a small pile of spent heads. I felt the shape of the night change. The fear that had first seized me had become calculation. Anger had smoothed into a protective resolve. I watched his face. Luca's jaw worked once, then relaxed. The scar at the corner of his lip caught the lamplight. "You burned them," he said. "You chose to burn them." It was not a question. It was a recognition. "Yes," I said. "I burned them." I made my speech brief because the room demanded it. Actions mattered here more than words. He leaned against the desk and exhaled. "You understand what you did," he said. "You destroyed something practical and something dangerous." He tapped the envelope at his feet. "But you also made sure I know to keep watch. That gives me leverage to protect you." Sofia stepped forward. "You will lock the estate," she said. "You will not let anyone in until Alina signs the inventory. You will not open anything alone." Her sentence was a rung of iron. Luca nodded. He looked at me and then, without speaking, folded back the edges of his glove and slipped a charred scrap into his palm. He did not show it to me. He did not need to. The motion was a private promise. It was an unexpected, quiet claim. He did not make noise about it. He did not demand title or presence. He made a simple, silent choice to hold the ash. That small action changed the balance between us. It was not an ownership of me. It was a custody of my secret. We moved outside to collect the cold black pieces. The terrace was a compartment of stone and lamp light. The iron bowl lay on the low table. Luca picked up a single, curled scrap with a fingertip and examined it as if he were reading a photograph under glass. He put the scrap into his other hand, closed his fingers, and placed the bundle carefully into his coat pocket. Sofia steadied me. "Alina," she said, "you are not alone tonight. You have me. You have set the terms. That matters." Her voice had the exact note of someone who would carry maps, keys, and the thermos of coffee to the end of the world. I felt the ash in his coat like an unvoiced pact. My fear had retreated to a small, persistent place. My anger had become a layered decision. I had chosen to burn and to rely on someone else to guard what remained. Relief came in small increments. I could breathe without thinking the house would be taken while I slept. The ache in my chest did not leave, but it thinned. Luca nothing for a long time. He walked the terrace edge and then came back to stand near the low wall. He did not offer to hold me. He did not need to. Instead, he said, "Tomorrow we will make the inventory. You will be present. Sofia will be present. I will have a witness. We will lock everything down." His words were measured. They were practical instructions dressed as reassurance. I nodded. My hands were wrapped around the silver locket that had been my mother's. I opened it with my thumb and looked at the small photograph inside. A fragment of memory, a kitchen table, sunlight on the teapot, sat in the oval. I closed it and slid it back under my sweater. Dawn found me at the kitchen table with an empty envelope and a locket that felt lighter in my palm. I set the envelope down and watched the first pale light move across the wood grain. The terrace doors were shut and bolted. Footsteps moved in the hall behind me, Sophia making coffee, Luca speaking low to someone on the phone about security details. The chapter of paper was gone. The house remained. The ash had a physical weight inside Luca's pocket. That scrap was now evidence of my choice and of his protection. When Luca came into the kitchen, he put a cup of coffee down in front of me and sat opposite without touching the chair, an inch of distance that meant civility. The men will patrol the gate. No one will leave or arrive without my say. We will do the inventory at 9. Sophia will be there. You will sign where needed. Then we will decide the next step. His voice was steady. He punctuated the plan with brief lines. Sophia passed me the thermos and smiled with a lopsided, tired grin. Elena, she said, you did what you needed to do. We will finish this together. The way she said my name carried the map of our nights together. Errands, arguments, grocery bags. Her loyalty had weight. We moved through the day like people who have counted the cost of a fight and chosen to take the small victories. The men at the gate watched the road. The house felt closed but not trapped. I kept thinking of the charred scrap in Luca's pocket. It was a private promise I had not asked for and that I had not refused. At 9 we gathered in the study. A list sat on the desk. Luca read aloud the inventory with a businesslike cadence. Sophia confirmed names and dates. I signed my initials next to the list. Each mark was concrete. Each sounded like a small bell of custody. When we finished, Luca folded the sheet and placed it in an envelope. He placed the sealed envelope in the inner pocket of his coat and then, with a single motion that did not call attention, he tapped the bulge over his heart. I took that as a tangible, immediate assurance. Sophia touched my arm as we left the room. Elena, she said, and then added, we have done the work. She paused as if to measure the word. Now rest. Let him watch the ash. Her tone was both practical and oddly private. I walked out onto the terrace alone for a moment and set the empty envelope on the table. The dawn slotted through the trees and caught the edge of the paper. I picked up my locket, set it beside the envelope, and then folded the empty paper once more. Not to burn, but to fold it into a smaller shape and tuck it into the drawer of the kitchen desk. It would remain there as an echo, not as an instruction. Luca came up behind me and rested a hand briefly on the railing. He did not touch my shoulder. He did not need to. You did what you needed to do, Elena. His sentence was short and factual. So did you? I said. I heard Sophia's hum in the house, a soft comfort. He turned and for a moment looked vulnerable in a way that was not dramatic. He simply looked tired. I will keep watch, he said, and I will keep that scrap. I will keep the memory of it when I need to remember what you chose. He did not say he would keep me. He did not say he would keep anything beyond the ash and the inventory. He paused and then added, almost as an afterthought, if anyone asks, we will say the letters were burned here. That will be the truth. I nodded. The final paragraph of the night closed with a small, specific act. Luca reached into his coat, palmed the tiny curl of charred paper, and placed it into my open hand for an instant. No words, only the grit between his fingers and mine. Then he let go. The scrap sat in my palm like a folded fact. I slid it back into my pocket and zipped my coat. A distant engine hummed. A man walked past the gate out on the road. Something closed. The letters, the threat, the night. I kept the scrap in my pocket, not as proof, but as a reminder that some things needed guarding by someone else while I learned to move forward. The doors of the estate remained locked. The inventory sat in Luca's inner pocket. Sophia brewed another pot of coffee. In the pale light, I touched the locket at my throat and then felt the weight of a small, deliberate choice, the matchbox empty on the mantel, the envelope folded away. The ash carried by the man who had stepped in front of me. Outside, a car drove on. Inside, a bowl stood black and empty. The final act of fire had been done. The next step was clear. Signatures, security, and the slow ungluing of grief from the things that had kept it sharp. I lifted my cup, felt it warm against my palms, and heard Luca close the study door behind him as he went to handle the men at the gate. The door shut with a soft click that felt like a promise and like an instruction to wake up to the day. That click was the chapter's end. A man walking to the gate, a sealed envelope in a coat, and my hand resting on a small, empty paper sleeve as morning moved over the terrace.